Welcome back to the channel. It's me, Eric. If you're new, please subscribe. Now, I know it's been a little while since we've uploaded any content on the Attack Evo X, but today we're going to do something. On today's video, we're going to be installing an oil pressure sensor on my Evo 10. Yes, there's different options out there as far as oil pressure gauges and sensors and whatnot. I know AEM definitely has one that works pretty well. But for my case, I have the CD5 on my car, and what's cool about that is via CAN bus, I can integrate my sensor into my digital dash and set up warnings and alarms for oil pressure. So that's a really neat feature of that, and that's the route that I'm gonna go on it. But regardless, installing the oil pressure sensor is the same procedure whether you have a gauge from them or you're doing this type of setup. Now, if you're watching this, you're probably looking to try and do this on your own car, or maybe you're just looking for information on it. So why would you want to install an oil pressure sensor or gauge onto your vehicle? If you're at the track and you have an issue with your car losing oil pressure, that can mean damage to your engine. So it's definitely ideal to have one of these on your car, especially if you've modified the vehicle. In order to do this on my car, you have to use a 6-channel CAN bus module, and that will allow me to add more channels into my CD5 that are either analog or other types as well, to be able to see on the digital dash all of my gauges. Alright, so I probably talked enough, so let's get into installing this sensor onto the car. So here we have the oil pressure sensor, and then also we have the connector that comes with terminals as well. And then you'll notice here we have the 6-channel CAN sensor module and a DTM style connector with terminals as well. In addition to those, I also picked up some 20 gauge wire, some heat shrink, and to make it look a little bit more professional, I also got some snake skin. So now that we have all that stuff, let's get to installing this on the car. So we jacked the car up just a little bit, that way we can get some clearance underneath here, but where we're trying to get to is right there on the oil filter housing. In between those two lines for the oil cooler is a little cap that needs to come out, and that's where the sensor is going to go into. Now mind you, that thing is in there pretty snug, so it takes a little bit of persuasion getting that thing loose, but we're going to go ahead and do that. And I'm going to end up putting an oil pan underneath here, that way I can kind of catch anything that drips out of there. Pro tip, guys, if you're having trouble trying to take this little plug out, what I recommend doing is, if you got a small little butane torch, just heat this thing up, not the housing, but this up for like 30 seconds, and do that like a couple times. In between each 30 seconds, you can try cracking the bolt, but it took a couple tries, but eventually was able to get this thing off. So, and I also recommend an 8mm Allen hex key for a socket. That really helped get the leverage that I needed, and yeah, it seemed to work. So now that this thing is out, we got to put the sensor in. So I picked up these little adapters off Amazon, and I'll have them linked down below so you guys can pick them up if you need them. Basically just a little adapter that goes from 3/8 to 1/8. It's able to fit onto the sensor. That way you can put it into the oil filter housing. I had pretty good success with this Permatex thread sealant. I used it on my FP oil feed line and had no issues with leaks. So that's what I recommend putting on the threading for this sensor. Let's thread this into the oil filter housing. That was a success. Now that we got the sensor in the oil filter housing, we can move on to wiring this thing up. But just make sure when you're doing it, take your time and just go slow with it, because you don't want to cross thread anything. Alright, so off camera I didn't want to bore you guys with the tedious work of wiring. I built this little wiring harness for the sensor that will plug into the 6-channel CAN module. So let's get to installing this on the car. Now that we got that cable all routed, it's time to get the CAN sensor module installed in the car. So many years ago, I made this little dash here out of carbon fiber with the full intentions of putting an oil pressure sensor gauge right here. That never happened though, so this is going to be a great opportunity. I'm still going to use this hole and feed my wires through here and attach that module right here to this carbon fiber dash. So let's get to doing that. So as you can see, I got it installed, and I made this fancy little Y cable to be able to go into that and then also go into my CD5 and tap into power as well. But yep, everything's all hooked up. So now we got to do some stuff on the laptop on the dash design software. Alright, so we're in the dash design software and we just need to go over here to the CAN tab, and what we're going to do here is assign a DBC file to the dash. So we're just going to select the one for the 6-channel module, and then we got the analog volts 3. Now we got to do a custom channel, so I'm going to label this my oil pressure. And then for primary input, we'll just assign the analog volts 3. And then to calibrate it, you just go to the sensor library and select the AEM sensor that we have, which is the oil pressure sensor. Now we'll go to the diagnostics page, and I need to assign an input to the oil pressure on this page. So we'll just use the input that is my oil pressure, and we're good to go. So the new file is loaded up into the dash, and now we got to test it just to make sure everything works. All right, we're going to check to see if we got oil pressure, which I should have oil pressure. There it is, we got oil pressure going to the dash. And I also set up warnings and alarms in there. So if it goes below a certain threshold and at a certain RPM, it'll let me know on the dash that that's happening, and I can either, go into pit or turn the car down immediately. So the only other thing that I recommend doing is just check and make sure you have no leaks, and sure enough, there's no leaks underneath the car, so we're good to go. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you smash that like button and also subscribe. Till next time, guys.